Human finds alien girl guarding a broken beacon, but human realizes the beacon shows his future. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's return to our main character Evan Cole as the storm rose like a living thing around him. The kind of electrical brew that made radio towers hum and the air taste faintly of metal. His utility rover crawled up the ridge, tires slipping on the sand that felt half like dust, half like powdered glass. Through the windshield smeared with magnetic grit, he saw it at last. The old subspace beacon, perched on a cliff like a fallen lighthouse. Its metal ribs flickered with a weak blue pulse, stuttering as if it were breathing in uneven gasps. Every few seconds the pulse sharpened into a thin beam that shot upward before collapsing back into silence. Evan frowned at the readings on his wrist console. Battery at 42%. Suit integrity good. But the magnetic interference was worsening, turning his HUD into a jittery wash of pale noise. The beacon wasn't supposed to be active. This ridge hadn't sent a stable signal in years. And yet something had forced a fragment of it awake. He stepped out of the rover, boots crunching on sand chilled by the high-altitude wind. Icy grains peppered his cheeks. His breath fogged faintly inside the helmet before the system whisked it away. He keyed on a low beam and climbed the last stretch on foot. The wind hit harder up here, pushing against him like a firm hand. He braced himself, adjusting his stance the way old field instructors had drilled into him back on Earth, back before he'd traded those dreams for steady paychecks and lonely shifts on forgotten stations. The beacon glowed again, a weak, wavering blue, and next to it, he saw her. A figure standing perfectly still against the storm, tall and slim, her skin a pale cerulean that caught the flickering light and made her look almost luminescent. She didn't shiver, didn't even glance at the wind. Her eyes, silver like frosted metal, were fixed on the beacon as if guarding a sacred flame. Evan felt his steps slow. He wasn't supposed to meet anyone out here. The ridge was empty on every map. Hey, he called cautiously, lifting one hand in a universal I come in peace gesture. You okay out here? Beacon seems like it's having a bad night. The girl finally turned. Not startled, not curious, just aware of him now, the way a statue might slowly acknowledge a passerby. Her voice carried oddly steady through the wind. Do not touch the beacon, human. The word wasn't an insult, but it wasn't warm either. Evan blinked. I wasn't planning on it. Just here to run diagnostics. The beacon pulsed again, brighter this time, and for a moment the blue light brushed his faceplate. Something in the glow felt off, too deliberate, like it was reacting to him. He stepped closer without thinking, drawn by an instinct he couldn't name. The girl's eyes widened, just a fraction. Stop. But he was already within arm's reach. The beacon flickered. The air thinned. And for a split second, Evan saw something impossible reflected in the polished metal panel. Himself, standing on this very ridge, wearing a uniform he didn't recognize, staring at something in the distance with an expression he couldn't read. He staggered back, breath catching. The image vanished. The storm roared. The girl's silver eyes fixed on him with new, sharp attention. You saw it, she said softly, almost like a realization meant for herself. It responded to you. Evan felt his pulse drum in his ears as the beacon dimmed again, its fading light echoing the uneasy thrum inside his chest. He didn't know what he'd just witnessed, but for the first time since arriving on this frozen outpost, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. A tug, a warning, a beginning. The wind pushed against Evan in steady waves as if the ridge itself was trying to tell him to turn back. The pale cerulean girl watched him with a stillness that felt older than the storm, her silver eyes reflecting both the flicker of the beacon and the faint outline of his own shape. He steadied his breath, trying to shake off the image that had flashed across the metal panel. It had felt too clear, too intentional, like a memory someone placed ahead of him instead of behind. His wrist console buzzed with a weak alert as the magnetic interference rose. That thing showed me something, he said carefully, not stepping closer this time. It was like a version of me. Here, but different. The girl did not react with surprise. Only a slow, measured breath. The beacon does not make mistakes, she said. It reveals what must be seen. Her tone carried no threat, but it also offered no comfort. Evan rubbed the chill from the edges of his gloves. You are talking like this is normal. She tilted her head slightly, as if studying the way his voice shifted under the wind. Normal is not a word I use, she replied. The beacon shows possibilities. Paths threads of what may come. It shows what shapes a life. Evan felt the wind bite at the seams of his suit. Look, I am just here on a maintenance call. I fix things. I do not read destiny. The girl's gaze returned to the beacon, her posture straightening with a kind of quiet duty. Then you will need to leave, she said. The beacon reacts strongly to those who have unresolved choices. If you stay too long, it may attempt to show more. Evan blinked. Unresolved choices? I think everyone has those. Not like yours. Her voice softened, almost an echo inside the storm. Evan's chest tightened unexpectedly. He wondered how someone who had not known him for 5 minutes could sound like she had already read pages of a book he had not opened in years. The beacon pulsed again, a gentle ripple of blue along the metal ridge. Evan felt it tug at him, faint but undeniable, as if the device remembered him. He stepped back instinctively, boots sliding a little on the sand. The girl noticed. It recognizes you, she murmured. Most who approach it receive nothing. It has been silent for seasons. So why now? Evan asked. She hesitated, and for the first time, he sensed something almost fragile in her expression. Because you are standing where someone important once stood, she said quietly. And because the beacon listens for those who might change the outcome. Evan opened his mouth to respond, but the wind shifted suddenly, carrying a new sound. A low, distant hum, not from the beacon but from above. Like something cutting through the upper storm layers. He glanced up, visor catching stray blue sparks. Drone traffic, he muttered. This far out. The girl's silver eyes narrowed. Your people are looking for you, she said. They must have traced your rover. Evan checked his console. The signal was weak, but he saw the faint tracking ping. They had noticed he stopped sending updates. You should go, she added, with a firmness that came from concern rather than command. Evan hesitated. He looked at the beacon, at the faint reflection of himself on the metal surface, and at the girl guarding it like it was the only thing keeping the sky from collapsing. I cannot leave this as it is, he said. Something here is wrong. Something here is inevitable, she corrected. But inevitability changes when a human refuses to follow the path laid before him. The hum overhead grew louder, wind sweeping across the ridge. Evan felt the moment tighten around him like a drawn breath, waiting to see what he would do next. The hum above the ridge grew stronger, smoothing into a steady vibration that Evan felt through his chest piece. His rover's tracker must have flagged his silence, and now a patrol drone was sweeping the storm pocket. He watched a faint white light drift behind the clouds, trying to cut through the magnetic haze. The pale cerulean girl stepped closer to the beacon, her posture shifting into something alert, almost protective. The storm light glinted along her silver eyes. If your people find you here, she said quietly, they will take the beacon apart. They do not understand what it holds. Evan brushed a layer of dust from his visor as the wind surged again. They will not dismantle anything. Not without orders. She looked at him with a calm that suggested she had already seen more than he had. Orders change when fear enters the room, she said. And humans fear what they cannot measure. He did not argue. She was not wrong. His hand went to his console again, checking his location, the coordinates flashing faintly through the static. A few miles away his assigned outpost blinked as a dim dot on the map, half buried under storm interference. He knew the protocol. If a technician went dark during a storm window, retrieval units were dispatched. A short burst of silence could send everyone scrambling. He exhaled slowly, letting the cold air calm the prickle in his nerves. All right, he said, trying to match her steadiness. Let us think this through. I cannot exactly send them a message saying I am chatting with someone who is not supposed to exist on this ridge. Her eyes flicked toward the sky where the drone glow pulsed faintly between clouds. You are concerned for them, she said. But you should be concerned for yourself. The beacon showed you something. That means it has marked you. It does not choose lightly. Evan tried to laugh it off, but the sound died quickly. Look, whatever it showed me, I am not sure it was real. Stormlight plays tricks. Her expression did not change, but her voice softened. You saw a future. Not fixed. Just waiting. Evan felt the words settle deeper than he expected. The image he had seen had not been dramatic or tragic. It had been quieter than that. A version of himself wearing a uniform that felt unfamiliar, staring at something he could not name. The kind of future someone drifts into rather than chooses. The wind swept a thin ribbon of sand across the ridge. The beacon flickered, responding faintly to his proximity. If the beacon reacts to me, he said slowly, why guard it? Why stand out here alone with it? She looked toward the machine, the faint pulse brushing against her skin like a dim glow. Because it carries echoes that can influence more than one life. My task is to keep it from those who would use it to force outcomes. Evan raised an eyebrow. Force outcomes. Like changing fate. Like removing choice, she answered. The hum above them grew louder as the drone passed overhead, briefly illuminating the ridge with a white sweep. Evan held still, instinctively lowering his profile against the rocks even though his camouflage was minimal. The girl stepped back into the beacon's shadow, disappearing almost completely under its glow. When the light faded, she looked at him again. They will circle back soon, she said. You cannot be here when they do. And leave you out here alone? I have been alone for many cycles, she replied calmly. This storm is nothing new. Evan felt a tightening in his chest again, faint but real. The beacon pulsed once more, reflecting a pale outline of his face on the metal surface. He stepped back and turned toward the slope he had climbed earlier. Fine, he said softly, but I will be back. The girl did not stop him. She simply watched as he moved away from the beacon, the storm curling behind him like a curtain, closing on a scene that was not yet finished. Evan descended the ridge slowly, boots slipping on loose sand that had been cooled by the storm into a metallic frost. The wind softened as he moved farther from the beacon, but the air still hummed with the static traces of its pulse. Every few steps he glanced back, expecting to see the pale cerulean girl vanish or glow or dissolve into the storm, but she simply stood there, a quiet figure outlined against the faint blue shimmer. His wrist console vibrated with a faint connection signal. Static, then a crackle of a familiar voice from the outpost. Cole, do you read? Your rover feed dropped. Report status. Evan hesitated, feeling the weight of what he had just seen on the ridge. The rules said he needed to report his position, give a clean explanation, verify equipment. But the image on the beacon panel flickered in his mind again, the strange version of himself held in a moment he did not understand. He thumbed the comm button. Still operational, he said, keeping his voice neutral. Storm interference is heavier than predicted. Rover is intact. I am returning. The reply came delayed through the static. Copy that. Retrieval drone scanned your location briefly. Stay visible when possible. Stay visible. He almost laughed quietly as the wind rushed around him. The drone had flown directly over his head while he stood next to a beacon that apparently reacted to fate. Being visible was the least of his concerns now. He reached the rover and keyed the hatch. The door opened with a soft hydraulic sigh, warm air spilling into the cold storm. As he climbed inside, the silence wrapped around him like a blanket. No wind, no humming sky, no alien girl watching him with unreadable eyes. Just the steady beeps of the rover's systems recalibrating. He sat for a moment, helmet still on, attempting to slow his breathing. Unresolved choices, he murmured to himself. The girl's words kept looping through him, echoing in a place he did not want to examine. Too closely, he started the engine. The rover rumbled to life. But before he put it into motion, he reached up and touched the side of his helmet, right where the beacon's glow had brushed it. The sensation was gone, of course, but the memory remained sharp. He drove down the ridge path, watching the storm fade behind him. The outpost lights were distant points on the horizon, pale and cold against the dark. His console chimed again. Cole, confirm no structural damage to your suit. Scanners picked up interference spikes near your coordinates. He cleared his throat. Suit is fine. The ridge has older equipment. Hard to say what caused the spike. Understood. Keep logs updated. Storm cycle resets at 0100 hours. Evan keyed off the channel before they could ask more questions. The rover rolled over a patch of sand that glittered faintly like ground crystal. He slowed without thinking. The girl had said she had been alone for many cycles, watching over something that could show a person pieces of their life. Pieces of what they might become. He wondered how many strangers she had turned away, how many futures she had guarded from eyes that should not see them. The outpost grew larger in the windshield. The exterior lights painted long shadows across the landing platforms. But as he parked the rover, something inside him stayed back on the ridge. He sat in the quiet for a long moment before finally removing his helmet. The air inside the cabin felt oddly warm now, almost heavy. He looked at the storm behind him, a faint glow still marking the ridge where the beacon pulsed. "I said I would come back," he whispered to no one. "I meant it." And as the outpost doors opened to receive him, the hum of the storm seemed to answer, low and distant, as if remembering him. Evan spent the next several hours logging data inside the outpost's main operations room, but his mind stayed fixed on the ridge. The hum of the storm, the flicker of the beacon, the pale cerulean girl with silver eyes that seemed to see more than he said aloud. Screens glowed in front of him, displaying wind maps, magnetic interference charts, and maintenance alerts. All routine, all easy. Yet every time he blinked he saw that brief reflection of himself on the beacon's metal panel, like a silent question waiting for an answer. The outpost felt unusually quiet for a storm night. The generators hummed steadily under the floor, and the overhead lights flickered now and then as the magnetic field outside strained against the shielding. Evan removed his gloves and rubbed his palms slowly, trying to ground himself back into the present. But the memory of the girl's voice lingered. Unresolved choices. He could not shake that phrase. At around midnight, the storm began to soften. The outpost sensors read a dip in the magnetic surge, giving the indoor air a slightly easier hum. Evan checked his console again. No new alerts. No new anomalies. The ridge remained unscanned. Relief washed through him, but it was mixed with something else he was not ready to name. He stood, stretched, and walked to the observation window. The landscape beyond lay in dim, bluish shadows, the storm clouds parting just enough to reveal a faint glimmer on the distant ridge. The beacon's pulse. He watched it for a long moment. It pulsed like a heartbeat. He pressed his palm against the cold window. "You are standing where someone important once stood." The girl's words returned to him, soft but sharp. Evan thought about the choices he had made over the years. Times he avoided conflict. Times he let chances slip by. Times he told himself he was simply doing what was practical. The beacon had shown him something that felt like a quiet warning, or an invitation. He exhaled slowly, fogging the window for a second. "This is ridiculous," he muttered to himself. "I cannot climb that ridge twice in one storm cycle." But the moment he said it, he knew he would. The outpost doors slid open behind him, letting in a faint gust of warm, recycled air. One of the senior technicians stepped in, half asleep and carrying a thermal mug. "Cole," she said, her voice rough with exhaustion, "you are still up? Anything unexpected out there?" He shook his head. "Just interference from the ridge. Nothing serious." She nodded and shuffled toward the equipment lockers. "Get some rest. Storm cycle resets in 4 hours." Evan watched her go, then returned his gaze to the distant pulse. He could lie to himself about many things, but not this. The beacon wanted something from him, or it had seen something in him. And the girl, guarding it, was not simply a stranger. She had looked at him as if she recognized a pattern forming around his life. He left the operations room, walking down the metal corridor lit by soft amber strips along the floor. The outpost felt safe, predictable, controlled. And yet he felt out of place here, like the walls were built for a person he no longer was. In his quarters he removed his suit, cleaned his visor, and set his equipment on the charging dock. But before lying down he stepped to the small window beside his bed. The beacon's faint blue glow pulsed again on the ridge. A soft, rhythmic beat in the darkness. Evan whispered into the quiet, "I am coming back." And even though no one heard him, the wind outside seemed to shift as if acknowledging the promise. Evan woke before the alarm, long before the storm cycle reset. The outpost was quiet, the kind of early-hour stillness where only the generators made a low, steady thrum under the floor. He sat up slowly, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, and saw the faint blue glow on the ridge through his small window. The beacon was pulsing again, calm and rhythmic, like it knew he was watching. He suited up with deliberate motions, tightening every strap, checking each seal. Not because of protocol, because something inside him wanted to move with intention for once, not habit. His wrist console flickered as he stepped into the corridor. The lights were dim, running on night cycle. Only soft amber strips guided him toward the exit. The automated doors opened with a gentle hiss, letting in the cold pre-dawn air. The wind had settled, brushing across the outpost grounds like a whisper. He walked across the gravel and frost, boots crunching lightly, his breath forming thin clouds. For a moment he looked back at the outpost, at its safe walls and predictable schedules. Then he turned toward the ridge and began the climb. The world was quieter now. No storm howling, no drone lights cutting through the clouds. Just the soft hum of the beacon ahead. As he moved, his thoughts hovered between the present and the image he had seen on the beacon panel. A version of himself he barely recognized. Steady, silent, wearing choices he had not made yet. Halfway up the ridge, he spotted movement. A faint shimmer near the beacon, like heat rising off asphalt on a summer highway. Then the shape sharpened. The pale cerulean girl stepped out from behind the beacon's curve, her silver eyes catching the early light. She looked the same as before, yet something in her posture seemed more open, less guarded. As he approached, she spoke first. You returned. It was not a question, more like an acknowledgement. Evan slowed, planting his boots firmly in the sand. I said I would. She looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing the meaning of that simple truth. Finally, she turned slightly toward the beacon. It reacted again while you were gone. Its pulse changed. Changed how? She gently touched the beacon's metal casing with the tips of her fingers. The blue glow responded with a soft ripple. It has begun aligning with your presence. It listens differently now. Evan frowned. I do not understand what that means. It means it sees your path shifting, she said softly. It is adjusting its echoes to match new outcomes. Evan felt a pull in his chest, subtle but undeniable. I have not done anything yet. You returned, she repeated. Many who see a glimpse of themselves choose distance. You chose connection. He shook his head lightly. I came back because you are out here alone. Someone should make sure you are not freezing. Her expression softened almost imperceptibly. I do not freeze easily. The beacon pulsed again, brighter this time. Evan stepped closer without thinking, and the girl did not stop him. The surface of the metal shimmered faintly, like a reflection trying to take shape. If it shows me something again, he said quietly. What does that mean? It means the beacon believes you are ready to see, she replied. But be careful, Evan Cole. The future is not a destination. It is a mirror, and mirrors can unsettle those who look too quickly. He exhaled, steadying himself. Then I will look slowly. The girl tilted her head, studying him with a softness that felt new. That, she said, is how choice becomes change. The beacon glowed once more, its pulse syncing with the quiet beat of the morning. Evan stepped toward it, not afraid this time, but curious, ready for whatever it would show him next. Evan stepped close enough that the beacon's glow brushed his gloves with a gentle warmth, a surprising contrast to the cold air curling along the ridge. The metal surface shimmered faintly, as if remembering the shape of his reflection. Leary stood just behind him, quiet but attentive, her silver eyes following every shift in the beacon's pulse. Evan raised his hand, but hesitated just before touching the metal. Last time, he said softly. It showed me something without asking. Leary nodded. It does not ask. It responds. But you can decide how much you allow it to reach. He drew a slow breath, steadying his heartbeat the way instructors had once taught him during emergency drills. Then he pressed his palm lightly against the beacon's casing. The blue light flared, soft but immediate, washing over his visor like a thin veil. For a moment, there was nothing, just the hum of the device and the wind brushing the ridge. Then the shimmer on the surface deepened, forming the vague outline of a figure. Evan leaned in slightly. The image sharpened. It was him again, older by only a few years, standing in a corridor that looked nothing like the outpost or the ridge. The lighting was warm, golden, not harsh like military fluorescence. He was speaking to someone out of frame, his expression earnest, as if explaining something that mattered. Evan felt a tightening in his stomach. He had never seen himself look that focused, that sure. The image flickered again. Now he saw himself sitting across from another person, their silhouettes peaceful, leaning slightly toward each other. He could not make out who it was, only the way the future version of himself listened with genuine care. The beacon shifted once more. A third image. Evan in the middle of an unfamiliar room, holding a small device. guiding someone's hands as if teaching them how to use it. There was no tension in his posture, no hesitation, only quiet purpose. The glow dimmed. The images faded like sand slipping between fingers. Evan pulled his hand back slowly, exhaling without realizing he had been holding his breath. He turned to Leary. What was that? She studied him for a long moment before answering. A possibility, she said. Not guaranteed, not forced, but earned. Evan frowned. It felt different from the last one. Not a warning. No, she agreed. That was not a warning. That was a path where your choices lead to connection, rather than isolation. He looked back at the beacon, feeling a strange warmth settle in his chest. So it shows the outcomes of what I might choose. It shows the outcomes shaped by your intentions, Leary said gently. The beacon responds to the inner momentum of a person. If your choices lean toward fear, it shows fear. If they lean toward courage, it reflects that instead. Evan rubbed a gloved hand over the side of his helmet. I have spent years doing what was expected, not what felt right. Leary took a small step closer, the morning light catching the pale blue of her skin. Then the beacon is showing you what becomes possible when you begin to choose differently. Evan met her gaze. Silver. Calm. Steady. Why me, he asked. Why respond to me at all? Leary looked back at the beacon, her expression softening in a way he had not seen before. Because you are beginning to want something better than the life you settled for, she said. And the beacon listens for that. The ridge fell quiet again. Just the pulse of the device, slow and steady, echoing somewhere deep inside him. Evan let out a long breath and whispered, almost to himself, maybe I am ready for better. The beacon answered with a single soft glow, as if agreeing. Evan stood with his hand still hovering near the beacon, the fading glow leaving a soft impression against his visor like the echo of a thought. The air around him felt different now, quieter and heavier at the same time, as if the ridge was holding its breath. Leary watched him closely, her silver eyes reflecting both the soft morning light and the last shimmer of the beacon's pulse. You saw more than one path, she said gently. The beacon does that when a person begins to shift inside. Evan let out a slow exhale, feeling the truth in her words even if he could not explain it. Those images, they did not look like me. Not the me I am right now. They were you, she replied. Just not the version of yourself that fear shaped. Evan felt that land deeper than he expected. He turned slowly, taking in the ridge, the sky, the thin line where the storm clouds had started to break apart. It all looked calmer than the day before, but he felt a storm moving inside him instead. So what does this mean? He asked quietly. That I am supposed to become that person? Leary stepped closer, her voice steady and clear. There is no supposed to. The beacon does not choose for you. It simply reveals the paths that already live within you. The path you choose is your own. Evan looked down at the beacon again. The metal casing hummed faintly, almost like a heartbeat. He realized he was no longer afraid of touching it. If anything, he felt drawn to understand it. Before he could speak again, a faint tremor moved through the ground, subtle enough that he wondered if he imagined it. Leary's expression tightened slightly. The beacon is shifting, she said. It does this when someone's internal momentum accelerates. Internal momentum? Evan repeated. Your resolve, she clarified. Your clarity. When you decide something important, the beacon adapts. Evan ran a gloved hand across the side of his helmet. I did not decide anything. You did, she said. Not in words. In intention. He looked away, unsettled by how accurately she could read him. His mind raced through the images he had seen. The quiet conversations. The soft expression. The sense of purpose. All things he had told himself he would get around to someday. Now someday felt closer. A faint beeping interrupted his thoughts. His wrist console lit up with a new signal. A weak transmission from the outpost, cutting through the magnetic haze. Cole, report in. Sensors are picking up fluctuations on the ridge again. Are you performing unauthorized repairs? Evan stiffened. He glanced at Leary, who did not move, but her eyes sharpened with alertness. If they come here, she murmured, they will not understand. The beacon will frighten them. Evan knew she was right. He had seen the way personnel reacted to anomalies. Protocol demanded investigation, deconstruction, testing. Nothing about that aligned with the quiet possibilities the beacon had shown him. He turned off the audio feed, but not the console entirely. He needed a moment to think. The tremor beneath their feet thinned into stillness again. Leary spoke softly. Evan Cole, the choice you make next speaks louder than anything the beacon could show you. Evan looked at the beacon, at the faint reflection of himself on its curved metal surface. This time, the reflection did not feel like a stranger. It felt like a question. He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment settle onto him with surprising clarity. Then I guess I need to decide what kind of future I am willing to protect, he whispered. The beacon pulsed once in quiet acknowledgement, its glow rising just enough to touch both him and Leary in the same breath. Evan kept his wrist console dimmed as the last fragments of the outpost's message faded into static. The ridge air felt heavier now, not from the storm, but from the decision forming in the quiet space between one breath and the next. Leary remained beside the beacon, her posture steady, but her silver eyes watched him with an intensity that made the moment feel suspended. The beacon pulsed again, softer than before, almost as if urging him without sound. Evan took a slow step closer to it, feeling the faint hum settle against his chest piece. If they come up this ridge, he said quietly, they will try to take the beacon apart. They will treat it like a broken machine instead of a whatever it actually is. A keeper of possibility, Leary murmured. A mirror for intention. Evan nodded. Right. And none of that will matter to them if they feel threatened by it. He looked out over the valley. The outpost sat small and distant, its lights faint under the thinning clouds. He thought of the technicians waking soon, running diagnostics, pushing him for answers. He thought of the future the beacon had shown him, not heroic or grand, but steady, connected, meaningful. A version of himself who had chosen something instead of drifting. He inhaled deeply. Leary, the beacon showed me paths. Versions of myself I did not think I could be. She tilted her head slightly. And what do you feel now? He hesitated. Not because he lacked an answer, but because the truth felt fragile in the open air. I feel that if I let them take the beacon, all of those possibilities disappear. Not because they are gone, but because I would be choosing the same kind of fear that shaped who I have been up until now. Leary stepped closer. The early light brushed across her cerulean skin, turning her edges soft and almost luminous. Then what choice do you make now? He looked at his wrist console and powered it fully down. No tracking. No autologs. No location feed. A clean silence. I am logging a false interference record, he said. One that marks this ridge as unstable. They will avoid scanning it for days. Leary blinked once, slowly. A surprise gesture for someone who had spent their life standing guard over a device that showed futures. You would do that for something your people might call a malfunctioning relic. Evan smiled faintly. Not for a relic. For the chance that what it showed me might actually matter. The beacon pulsed, brighter than before, warming the air around them in a soft wave. Leary looked at it, and then back at him, her voice quiet. The beacon acknowledges intention. It cannot speak, but it understands when someone chooses a path of protection rather than control. Evan stepped beside her, shoulder nearly touching her, both facing the glowing device. So what happens now? She looked at him, and there was a gentleness in her expression he had not seen until this moment. Now the future becomes your own. The beacon has nothing more to show you until you walk further into the life you wish to build. Evan let the words settle in him, slow and grounding. The ridge felt different now, less like a boundary and more like a beginning. The storm clouds continued to pull apart, revealing a stretch of dawn sky. Pale gold, quiet, hopeful. Leary reached out and touched the beacon's surface. The glow softened, then dimmed, then finally settled into a resting pulse, as if entering a peaceful sleep. It is safe now, she said. It knows its purpose has been honored. Evan watched the faint light linger across the curved metal. For the first time, he did not feel the weight of expectation pressing down on him. Instead, he felt space. A widening. A possibility. Leary stepped back from the beacon and looked toward the horizon. Evan followed her gaze. The sky was opening. The wind was still. The ridge held its breath. He whispered softly into the morning air, I think I am ready. And in the quiet that followed, nothing answered aloud, yet everything seemed to agree.